You know, it's been a long time since I've legit been excited waiting for a new game to arrive, and to really set the tone for the rest of this video, Saints Row hasn't failed to meet my expectations, and not only does this game look and feel like a Saints Row game, it feels like a game that I'm going to keep coming back to for years to come. That is, if I can even play the game. Most of the time when I try to launch Saints Row, I get this stupid message: accept the permissions for using the game. As a result of this bug, every time I do get into the game, I have to make sure that I make the most out of it, sometimes even just keeping the game on while I do other stuff around the house. And I have a few hours of gameplay, I've gotten pretty far into the story, I've seen a lot of what the game has to offer, but I tried to get a bit more footage for this video and the game was not having it, so I figured, well, I wanted to make a video on this game, so I'll just have to work with what I've managed to gather so far, which is thankfully quite a lot, so we should be good. Anyways, when you do get into the game, you're greeted with a cutscene that takes place in the future. You create your character and then find out that something bad happens, and the story begins from a few months prior to the events that just took place. Other than that, the story is pretty much exactly the same as every other Saints Row game. You're trying to grow and expand the Saints while rival gangs and factions try to cancel you. The first thing you'll notice when you actually start playing the game is that the game feels a lot like a third-person shooter. Like all the other Saints Row games had a third-person perspective, but were more like an action-adventure kind of thing which turned into a shooter only when you were actually shooting. Here though, it feels like from the ground up, the game is a third-person shooter, if that makes sense. Although the game primarily plays like a third-person shooter, it doesn't really stop it from emulating other popular games. Like in one mission I was jumping from car to car, shooting bad guys, and then jumping on top of transport that's in motion while dodging gunfire from other bad guys with guns and turrets. Kinda like Uncharted. And then there's a bit where I think was heavily influenced by the Yakuza series, where you have to beat down overwhelming numbers of rival gang members barehanded. Then there's numerous parts in the game where you're basically playing Heavy Rain with numerous amounts of button prompts and button mashing. It's all enjoyable to play along with. There's also quite a bit of tongue-in-cheek when it comes to the banter between the characters, like there's one bit where the protagonist is explaining why we see crosshairs in video games.
Next, my research said keep your eyes open when you shoot.
Sure, I like to pretend there's a little white dot or crosshairs on whatever I'm shooting at, and then just aim for it, like this.
It just goes that extra length, and I like that. Going out into the open world for the first time was a treat. I think the location is based on Nevada, and the vastness of the map, at least visually, is just stunning. Though I feel like the actual playable map itself is a bit small. Though to be fair, it is as big as it needs to be, I think. There's a few instanced areas that are used in missions, like you're in a never-ending dirt road on one mission, and sometimes you go to inaccessible areas during activities and key missions, so you never really see the same area twice, at least from what I've seen. That being said, I do have to say I think the map does look a bit samey overall, no matter where you are. It's mainly just desert, roads, and the occasional city area. I guess once you start going off the mission path, you'll end up finding some cool areas, though usually in a big map like this, in just a few hours you end up learning the roads, and by memory you can take note of all the landmarks, but with this game and 6 to 7 hours of gameplay, I'm still finding myself relying on the sat-nav to get me places that I've already been to. Controlling the player character is as responsive as it's always been with the Saints Row games, with less emphasis on realism and more focus on exaggerated action. Your character can jump higher than his own height. I think that speaks wonders in itself. Cars, I have to say, Saints Row never really cracked the code with cars and physics, and this entry to the series is no exception. The car driving controls are fine on the most part, but they do break apart when you start doing stuff like going off-road, taking jumps, ramming other cars, or pretty much doing anything other than road driving. And yes, you can get off-road kits for your car to make the off-road driving a bit easier, but I'm more talking about like the stability of the physics of the game when you're just doing anything other than driving on flat roads. And just like the previous games, you can make your cars drift. Drifting is a force to be reckoned with, having a sort of forced inertia put upon your vehicle when you start to drift, which is pretty fun when you get the hang of its quirkiness, but most of the time it can send you unexpectedly veering off the side of the road like some invisible force is just pushing the car sideways. I'm not really too sure if the drift controls are really a good thing or a bad thing, because once you get used to it, not only do you go faster, it's also really satisfying pulling off 90-degree corners. So I just have to say that drifting is just one of those Saints Row-y things. You either hate it or love it. Combat, as I say, plays a lot like a third-person shooter, but just like the previous games, you also have other methods of attack to choose from, like melee, special abilities, and for a lack of a better name, glory kills. You fill up a flow meter, and then when you get maximum flow, you can perform glory kills. I think they're supposed to do something to your health and affect abilities, but I didn't really notice anything that happened looking at the footage for this video, and the hint box telling me what it's supposed to do went and left before I could really read it properly. You can equip up to 4 special abilities at once. Early abilities that you can get are anti-personnel mines that you can pull out of your arse and deploy wherever you like, which come in very handy for those enemies that like to wave their lightsabers around and block bullets. Yeah, there's those kinds of enemies. There's also a notable ability which lets you tank more hits before dying. There's also passive abilities like running faster if you're low on health, but overall I'm not really a fan of how these work, and I would have just preferred the older unlock system where you can just spend cash on extra perks like faster reloads on SMGs or more health or I don't know, faster driving. Here you have to unlock them by doing specific challenges, which I find a bit of a pain because you have to keep track of stuff and Speaking of enemies, unlike the previous games which only really had the small and large enemy that you had to worry about, you know, the ones that would carry a big minigun, this game has a larger variety of different enemies that have to be taken out in specific ways. Like, you have the generic goons and the big guys with the machine guns, but you also have the armoured units which the player is unable to perform a glory kill on unless their armour stat is reduced to 0, and these enemies often charge at the player to perform a heavily damaging attack by themselves. There's also these annoying buggers who think they're in Star Wars waving their neon dongs around, able to block bullets from the front. You either have to wait till they use their ranged attack, leaving them exposed for a short while, or force them into a stagger by using explosives or those anti-personnel mines that I mentioned earlier. One of the selling points about this game was that you can get a wingsuit now, which is... okay. Saints Row has always placed a heavy emphasis on player customization, and I have to say they've really outdone themselves this time. Though I can't help but feel they've really gone the full length when it comes to LGBTQ stuff. You can straight up be a muscle man or a submissive femboy with man boobs and thick thighs. I mean, it's not really my cup of tea. I prefer a more down-to-earth look, just like I do in GTA. But I think this is a real treat for those who have that way of life and want to express themselves, and I applaud Volition for including this. Alongside characters, there is of course car customization, just like the previous entries, and it's pretty good. But now we also have weapons customization, and it's good, like Red Dead Redemption 2 good, with separate parts of the weapon being customizable to your liking. Activities and zones pretty much follow the same formula as the previous entries to the series, with certain zones having properties that you plonk down and they unlock side missions that you can do. I wasn't actually able to do any of the activities due to Epic Games not letting me play the damn game! Now, as good as this game has been so far, there's a few minor tidbits that I think you'll probably need to know. I've already told you about my issues of getting into the game in the first place. That'll hopefully be fixed soon enough, but I've also ran into one major bug and a few minor bugs. The major bug I ran into actually soft-locked my game when I was in the character customization menu at the start. Yeah, good first impressions. And here's a small compilation of minor bugs that I noticed during gameplay. overall, so far, is Saints Row worth buying? Well, if you're like me and you can't stand GTA 5... anymore and want a new GTA-style open-world game that's fun, Saints Row will keep you happy. The humor and structure that the Saints Row games are known for are replicated here and better than ever. The game's graphics are acceptable, nothing groundbreaking, the physics are hilariously unrealistic to the game's benefit, the game is a bit glitchy but nothing too bad, and may get fixed down the line. I am surprised that Volition never chose to make a fully fledged online mode for this game. I really feel like this game could have benefited from that, and I know for well, people who play GTA 5 are desperately looking for a competitor to GTA Online, and Saints Row just doesn't have that. The best thing that it does have is an online co-op, which I would have liked to try out, but I can't play the damn game! All things aside though, a rating out of 10. I've never really done game reviews on this channel before, so, okay, comparison to GTA 5 single player, probably its closest competitor. That game gets a 9 out of 10. Again, this is excluding the online. Saints Row gets, I'd say, 8 out of 10. Saints Row is a more humorous game than GTA 5 and isn't afraid to branch out with crazy stuff to set itself apart, but the physics engine isn't as good as GTA 5, the driving isn't that good, whereas GTA 5 is the perfect balance between realism and fun. Saints Row's map to me seems a bit repetitive, a lot of the stuff looks similar, whereas GTA 5 has a good mix of locales that you can recognize and easily take note of the layout and memorize. This might sound like I'm slagging Saints Row off a bit, saying that GTA 5 single player is a better game, but honestly I am sick of GTA 5. Saints Row is now my go-to open world criminal sandbox game, so long as I can actually play the game. It's fresh and full of things to discover, and who knows, when I can actually play the game, there might be more that the game has to offer that I couldn't cover because of Epic Games' DRM. In the meantime, I hope you found this little review useful. If you did, make sure to give it a like, and I'll see you around, folks.